for everybody. So if you come up to our website or check out our YouTube channel within the next week, I hope, this will be posted to our YouTube channel. Information will be on our website at www.cad-1.com. And as I mentioned a moment ago, today's session is on data management tools using AutoCAD Map 3D, or, again, for those of you who are used to using Civil 3D, your Map 3D tools are in there. So the questions pop up of, the reason I'm talking about this today is we've got people out there who are using Civil 3D. They've got shape files, maybe they've got survey point files, they've got other files, or they've got data connections. And then you need a way to get all of that information and put it together, in such a format that it's actually usable. Who knows that reference, by the way? Everybody should know that reference. But it's actually usable and, more importantly, reusable. Now, you can take anything. It goes back to the old days of having paper copies and just putting all the paper copies in one big drawer and having to file through them. We don't want to have to do that with all of our files. We don't want to have to do that in waste time with all of our data. So we want to combine all of the data that we've got, our drawings, our shape files, etc., into one great big data source so that we can manage it easier and reuse it. Maybe you want to add information to that data source. So, okay, I've got a bunch of data, I've got a bunch of files, I add them all in, but obviously I'm a GIS group, or I'm an engineering company or survey company, and I want to be able to keep adding and adding and adding data to that. Where did they put my water? I know they want to keep it away from me, but I'm going to have to drink my water. Okay, whoops, I spilled it again. You want to add more information so you can make it extensible. Oh, and by the way, for those of you who've heard the term extensible but don't know what it means, it's just where it takes into consideration future growth. I love Wikipedia. So also, maybe I want to share this information. I've got it in one big data store. Sure, the people in my office need to use it, but I want to give it out to somebody else. I want to give it to a government agency, a city agency, or just a buddy of mine who's got his own survey company. And maybe in the future, I want to be able to migrate all of my data into another format or into another system. Yeah, AutoCAD's great, AutoCAD Map is great, but I'll be quite honest, at some point, if you're going to get into the GIS realm, you are going to want to migrate your data into something a bit more GIS-y. But for the time being, you've got your software and you can't afford $20,000 or $30,000 for one of those great big GIS systems. So what do? Okay, so here are the basic steps to start with. And yeah, I'm going to be jumping back and forth into the software. I'm going to be going a little bit crazy today since we're starting about 15 minutes late. And we're going to keep this running for the whole time. So hopefully you all can hang out with us. So the first thing you need to do is determine if your data is static or dynamic. Now let me define those terms. Static data is something that you're not going to need to update. It's not going to need to change. Now that does not mean that you don't want to add information to it. Okay, so I've got a block of a fire hydrant. Now a fire hydrant isn't going to move, and if it moves, I'll be the one responsible for it. But I may want to add attributes to that fire hydrant. Okay, that's not what I mean by dynamic. That's definitely static data. It's data that I'm in control of, that it's probably not going to move ever in my life, and that I may want to add information to. Dynamic data is data that's not mine, that I've downloaded from someplace else, and it's able to change frequently. Say the cities in the the streets in the city and county of Denver. Okay, those are changing. They're adding new streets. Maybe they're shifting one street around, and I'm not responsible for the streets. That's a CDOT thing or a city and county of Denver thing. I download their file, and I'm going to need to keep downloading their files frequently. All right, so if it's static data, if it's data that I've done in a project or data that I know isn't going to change, what am I going to do? The first step is I'm going to migrate all of that data into one big central data store. I'll talk about what you should use or what you can use. If it's dynamic data, though, you want to keep the files in a particular location, put them up on the server somewhere. You want to download the new files or update them as needed. You can download or purchase a little timer that you can plug into your computer, a little reminder system, or just use Office. Whoops, I don't want 360 to open. And have it remind you to go up to a particular website, link it to a particular website, and download the data and overwrite this stuff as needed. the most important things, and I've said this twice in this little PowerPoint here, is you've got to use map dry. So I'll talk about that a little bit in just a few minutes. All right, so I've got a bunch of static data, a bunch of my engineering data, survey data, etc., drawings, Civil 3D files, shape files, point files. I've got all this stuff. What do I do to it? How do I get it in there? All right, the migration is relatively straightforward. Civil 3D, you've got a button in your Output tab, which I'm not going to show you because it's just a button and you guys can find it, and it says Export to SDF. All right, now, spatial data format. I'm going to go into this in great detail here in another slide, but spatial data format, SDF, it's a file. It's just like an AutoCAD DWG on steroids. It allows you to add all kinds of attribute information and basically turn your drawing into a GIS system. All right. The important thing that you're going to need to note is if you do this export right out of Civil 3D, you can't append, you can't add to an existing SDF file. It's going to create its own. So it's going to overwrite anything that you try to append to. There are workarounds, which I'm going to show you here. DWG file, a drawing file. You can use the AutoCAD map export and export that to an SDF file. And that's cool because you can append it. And you can actually, this is the best way of working with AutoCAD drawings, as I'm going to show you here in a moment. DWG files, you can also add it to an existing SDF file by just entity by entity basis. So do I want to take an entire layer? Do I want to take the entire drawing? Or do I want to just take one or two objects and add it to something? And I'll show you a couple differences there. Shape files. Shape files, you can export that to an SDF file, but once again, you can't append it. So let's start talking about this, and then I'll get into the dynamic stuff. Oops. And there's my AutoCAD map. Okay, so here's my AutoCAD map. And as I mentioned, Civil 3D in your output ribbon or somewhere, you've got an export to SDF, and it's going to export an SDF file. So let's take a look at what Civil 3D would export, and then we'll talk about working with shape files, drawing files, etc. So the tool sets that I'm using, hopefully everybody's used to this by now, and you've all seen it, and hopefully some of you or all of you are playing with this. This is the FDO connection tool. This tool allows you to connect to and work with GIS databases in any format. Now, as you might see here, and do I have my, let me see if I've got my little e-pointer. Cool, I've got my e-pointer. Okay, so as you see up here, this is the list of all of the different types of format that I can connect to. Now, a second ago, Warren, you just said you could connect to anything, but I only see about a dozen or more file formats there, and if anybody's been in my webinars before, you know how many file formats there are. Does anybody remember the number of GIS type file formats that there are out there? You can type that in the questions and answers thing. I'll see if we can't send you something like a cool little flashlight or something. See if anybody remembers that number that I've thrown out there earlier. But there are a bunch of them. So I don't have all of them. How do I get to the rest of them? Well, one place I can go to is this little place, OSGEO, and it's a website that I can go to download different providers that I can connect to. And you can also head up to a company called Safe Software. They've got a tool called FME, and it'll open up all of the different formats that you're allowed. I don't see anybody typing that in there. Come on, nobody's going to take a chance?
Got some nice door prizes for those who can come up with the answer.
Okay, so I'm going to connect to an SDF file, and this one was exported. Let me find my files now that I'm on a completely different system. And there it is. Okay, so there's my sample civil file. This is just a sample file that was directly exported right out of Civil 3D. And I'm going to use it to start to work with. Now, you can use anything. You can use different file formats. You can use a relational database. And I'll talk about the differences between those and the pros and cons. But I'm just going to start by working with this. I've got a civil engineering project. I exported to an SDF, and I said, you know what? This is going to be my base, and I'm just going to start and run with this. So what can I bring in? Now, the information that you export out of Civil 3D can't be edited. So I've got my alignments, my parcels, pipes, points, etc. And I'm going to add that to map. Now, you'll probably notice that I have not assigned a coordinate system because, as I've mentioned before in classes, do as I say, not as I do. So always assign coordinate systems to your drawing and coordinate systems to your files. Now, that being said, I'm just going to bring all this information in, and that's what a civil file looks like, just a civil project file. I've got my different layers available over here. I can turn them off or on, work with them at will, and I've done other webinars that tell you how to stylize them, etc. But this can be my base. Let's say that this is the base that I want to start with. Now, I really do recommend SDF files to start with because they're just real easy, they're portable, there's a lot of cool things about them. So I've got my SDF file. I've got to remember where I am and all my notes. So I've got my SDF file in there. How do I add extra information to it? So as I mentioned, if you export out of Civil 3D, you've just got this one file. But now that I've used this one file, I want to create more and more and more. Okay, couple things. To add extra information into a layer that I've already got. So I've already got a layer, or we call these feature classes. I've already got a feature class, and I just want to add extra information into it. Relatively straightforward. I could draw it up, or I could use AutoCAD objects like this rectangle. Let's say that this rectangle is a parcel. Pretty straightforward to add information to an existing data store out of a drawing. Now, this is individual object by individual object. Right-click. Come down here, new features from geometry, and I get to pick the object, and I get to do windows and crossings and all that good kind of stuff. I'm going to hit enter. It says, do you want to erase the object? Yeah, I'm going to erase the object. I'm dumping all this into my database. So there it is, and it's going to bring up the database, and it's going to bring up the table, and it's going to ask me to fill in all the blanks. Names, areas, anything else that I've got in there for these for the parcel definitions. So when working with data, when I'm building up my data store, the first thing to understand is that it's flexible if I keep it in one of these file formats. It's very, very flexible. If I just want to add information to it, add information to the parcels or to the alignments or to the pipes, I can do that off of AutoCAD objects. You can extract polylines out of alignments and add that information in there if you want to. Okay. Now the next thing, I'll talk about editing this and working with this here in a moment. The next thing is, all right, I have got another area over here, and this is going to be a water area. All right, I don't have water areas over in here, so how do I do this? Now, the easiest way to do this is to export out of an AutoCAD drawing directly into your SDF file. Okay, Alt-Tab, back to my presentation. So the first thing that I just showed you, I can add entities to my SDF. So I just showed you that. You just pick the layer that is already existing and you say, I want to add something to it. Or you can draw some pretty easy, pretty straightforward. But wait a minute, what if I've got a whole bunch of objects? They're not in my SDF and I don't have a feature class for them yet. Ponds, lakes, streams, rivers, the lion, the witch, the wardrobe, everything is in there. All right, I'm just going to use this one object as an example. But let's say I want these to be ponds, lakes, or whatever. So in that instance, what do I need to do is I need to export this object into that SDF file. It's pretty straightforward. Except if you go to the output ribbon, you're going to go a little bit crazy. You know, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Okay. If you choose, oh, I'm already connected to FDO connection, I want to send that in there. 2 years later. And it's going to give you a list of the FDO connections. Okay, the FDO connection is looking for one of those super databases like ArcSDE or Oracle or something. Yes, I know. This is an FDO connection, but that's not what the program's looking for. So how the heck do I get it in there? It's not in the output ribbon. It is in your application menu. Don't ask me why they put it there. I'm going to export down here, other GIS formats or SDF. So it's not in your export ribbon anymore. So I'm going to go to the SDF file. I'm going to go find the SDF file that I'm currently attached to. And scroll down here. Okay, there's my sample civil file that I'm currently attached to over there. Hit OK. There it is. This is about the only time, folks, that you're going to get this message. Do you want to append to it or do you want to overwrite it? If you don't get this message, the message that you're going to get is, I'm about to overwrite that file. Are you sure you want to overwrite it? So if you want to export out of Civil 3D and try to append, you can't. If you want to export a shapefile, you can't. So be aware of this, but I do want to append to it. brings up the rest of the dialog box. I'm going to select an object or objects manually. So grab those guys right there. Okay, I'm going to go to my feature class, and I would give it a name. This is where I'm going to give it a new feature class name. So I'm going to call this one Ponds. Okay, and then also remember that and a cool thing about SDF files as opposed to shape files. Now shape files, you can only have one feature class and one feature type, meaning I can only have lines or points or polygons. With SDF files, I can have all three at once. I could say that in this feature class, I've got all three of them. That makes things, okay, this is the next thing I forgot to write down. And I know I'm a little haphazard and jumping all over the place, folks. But if you want to share your data, so I want to share it with other people, the most common format of sharing data is a shape file. And I can give somebody a shape file, but I cannot give them a multiple type shape file. While that is out there, it's not really supported by Esri. So if I tell the program that I want points, lines, and polygons, and I want to give this feature class to somebody, these ponds, they can't take it. They won't be able to take it because their format only understands one of these, not all of them. So while you all are working with this, it's just a really good idea. Even though AutoCAD SDF files, we can do it, doesn't mean you should. So pick one of these. My ponds are always going to be polygons, okay? Very important. Stick with one, not multiple. Options, the other thing that people get very confused on. Got to treat closed polylines as polygons. If you don't, then the program won't find anything. If I don't check this box and hit OK, the program will not find anything. It'll say, nope, 0 added. Okay, so here's what we're trying to do. Remember, data management, I've got AutoCAD drawings, entire layers, or I've got objects, multiple objects, and I want to add them into my big data store that I'm collecting. This is how we're going to do it. I'm going to hit OK. Down here, whoops, down there at the bottom, one object, one selected, exported in 0 seconds, so faster than anything. Where the heck is it? Okay, I didn't connect to it. It didn't have a ponds a minute ago, did it? So I'm going to go back and connect to my data. There's my SDF file. Okay, here's the thing that's a little bit flaky. Looking at this, okay, Warren, you lied to me. Where are your ponds? All right, got to disconnect my existing file, and then I got to reconnect it. Then it finds everything new that you put in there. Again, don't ask me why. I just wish it would pop up on its own, but you have to disconnect it and reconnect it. You would think that just by hitting something like refresh over here that you would get all of that, but you don't. All right, so there's my ponds. I can add that information into my map, and I now have a new ponds layer. Isn't that cool?
Very.
So this is building up your own GIS, folks, and I'm assuming that everybody who's on the call with me today has AutoCAD Map or Civil 3D. And if that's a bad assumption, then you might want to talk to Matisse or somebody here and maybe get a copy of AutoCAD Map or Civil 3D. But you've already got the software, I'm figuring, and I'm talking to you about building a data store of information, and how much did this cost you? It didn't cost you anything. It cost you 45 minutes while you're listening to Warren babble over here. But I'm giving you ideas about how to build a huge GIS and keep adding to it, adding to it, and adding to it. And it doesn't cost you anything, and that's really cool. Okay, so the next thing. So there's DWG files. I've exported that into an SDF and added it as a feature class. And we'll talk about the limitations of SDF here in a moment. Now, before I go too far with what I was doing, let's talk a little bit about the dynamic data, the stuff that's not yours, that you're going to be downloading frequently, that you don't want to have to mess with. Okay, you're going to use that FDO to work with the data. That connection that I just showed you, you're going to connect to the shape files or anything else using that. But when you download this stuff and you put it in a central location, here's key, folks. You got to use a mapped drive letter and make sure everybody in the office is using the same drive letter. Now, why on earth do you have to use a mapped drive letter? When I made this connection to the data, to my SDF file, I'm going to hover over that for a second. See the path? All right, that's a hard path. That's what we call a hard path. And that means that if that file moves or if any part of that path changes, it's broken. So you all know XREFs. You all know if somebody moves the XREF, then I'm kind of hosed. Well, there's a lot of ways to get around that with an XREF. If I put it in the same folder as the drawing file, that gets around it. If I use the cool XREF manager to change all my paths, I can get around it. We don't have those things here. We definitely don't have those things here. So you want to make sure that this path never, ever, ever changes. And like that's going to happen, right? You're always going to have some IT person or somebody who's going to move things or change or something. So how about taking that path and just putting it in as a mapped drive? Y'all know how to do mapped drives? It's really pretty straightforward.
Can we get a raise of hands of those who know how to do map drives?
Yeah, does anybody, yeah, raise your hand if you know how to do a map drive. Raise your hand if you're still paying attention, or if you can still hear me. Okay, so you got a bunch of you who are raising your hands, and you can go ahead and lower them now. About a half of you raising your hands know how to do map drives. For those of you who don't, here it is. It's not that hard. You just right-click on your computer and say Map and Network Drive. That's really pretty straightforward. You're going to give the drive a name, and then you're going to go find the folder. All right, so wherever you're putting all of your files, map the drive down as far as you possibly can. If you want your shape files in a different location than your SID files, then map the drive to the one above that. But keep everything in the same location so that, guess what? If that path changes, guess what you have to do? You have to come over here and remap the drive, and everything works again. So that's just the coolest thing in the world. That's the easiest way to work with map, with these FDO connections, up until Autodesk has some kind of really neat tool that says, go in here and change all the drive letters for me automatically. But we don't have that tool. So use mapped drives. Cannot stress that one enough. Okay, get back to my little presentation here. Now another thing, a lot of people say, well, I like having drawings and I want to keep them as DWG files. Okay, why on earth would you want to keep them as DWG files? Well, here's why. Pop quiz for everybody. Here's another one. Let's see who answers first.
We still have door prizes out.
Yeah, we got our door prizes. So everybody ready? If I give this drawing to somebody with AutoCAD, how many of these objects can they see? Very good, Jeremy.
All right, Jeremy.
All right, Jeremy wins. He got there first.
Nicholas, 5?
5. Nicholas, close, but the answer is 0.
Way to go, John. John got 0 as well.
Yep. Jeremy was the first, so Jeremy, you win. We're going to send you a door prize. Not a 6-pack of beer or a bottle of water that you can spill on your keyboard. But we're going to send you a door prize. So write that down. Okay, Jeremy's exactly right. I'm connected to FDO. There is absolutely nothing in this drawing that somebody with plain AutoCAD or AutoCAD LT can see, or even AutoCAD Architecture. So FDO is visible to only people with the FDO tool sets, meaning AutoCAD Map or Civil 3D. Okay? So these don't even come in as proxies. I mean, that's the problem. These don't even come in as proxies. So there's nothing is going to be visible there. So people complain and say, well, what if I want to give the drawing over to somebody with just plain AutoCAD? We want to keep AutoCAD DWGs. We want to keep them and add intelligence to them. Okay, you can do that. If you want to keep just AutoCAD drawings, you can do that by adding in object data to your AutoCAD objects, to your drawings. So in my map setup ribbon, okay, I'm going to define my object data, and it's relatively straightforward. Real easy dialog box. I'm going to say this is going to be about water lines. This is going to be, the field name is outer diameter. It's going to be an integer, and I'm going to say add it. I'm going to hit OK. You can add as many as you want. You can remove them. You can rename them. They're much easier to work with than, say, block attributes or something else. And then I can go ahead and attach that object data to these entities and work with them all day long. Okay, downside of working with object data is, guess what? And I'm not going to give out a door prize because this is just kind of a real easy one. If I give that drawing with object data, how many people can see the object data that's got AutoCAD or AutoCAD LT? Once again, 0. But they can see the entities at least, but they can't see my object data. So working with AutoCAD DWGs, there's pros and cons. Object data, still, it's only visible to AutoCAD Map. Sure, I can give the drawing to somebody and they can work with it all day long. But here's something better. I can give, let me erase that. I get back to this. I can give this drawing to somebody with AutoCAD, and they'll see every bit and piece of it if I just use this tool right here. So in my Maps tool, I want to say save my map as an AutoCAD drawing. It's going to just take a picture of everything in here, save it as AutoCAD objects, and somebody with LT or plain AutoCAD can see this and work with it all day long. They don't get to see any of my attribute information, any of my cool data, but they didn't get to see my object data a minute ago. So I'm not crazy about that option. I'm not crazy about the people who say, oh, I just want to work with AutoCAD drawings, and can't I make them intelligent? Well, yeah, you can, but still, you're crippling your drawing. All right? Another thing, dynamic data. If you download a shapefile, say from the city or the county of Denver, and you say, I just want to connect to it, you can't edit any of the information. You can edit the data, the actual attributes, but you can't add attributes to it. What on earth is Warren talking about can't edit a schema? What is that? Whoops, hitting the wrong button. Can't edit a schema. Okay, let me show you, because this is the next step in building up your own cool database program. Last thing I added in, ponds. How much information do I have with that pond? Nothing. I got nothing. No data. No attributes. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If I grab, say, one of these alignments, okay, look at all that cool information here. I've got, stretch that out, I've got the name, the length, the starting station, the design speed. I've got all these cool attributes, but in my ponds, I've got nothing. So how do I make this into a real, true data store so that I can manage all my data better? Easy. In my Map Explorer tab, I'm going to edit the schema. Now, a schema is basically the definition of each one of these layers. It's what is on there. It's geometry. What type of geometry? It's a point. What type of information do I have? So that's a schema. So I want to edit my schema. I'm going to grab my SDF file, hit that button, and say I want to edit a schema. Okay, got to check in all the features if I've added in anything. Okay, and here's my neat little schema editor. Now, SDF files will only support one schema, so basically one central data store. So if you think about it, you can think of it as like if I've got all the information for a city, I might have one schema called utilities, and then underneath there I would have water and sanitary and storm and yada and electrical and yada, and then another file or another schema called buildings, and I would have residential and all that good kind of stuff. So that's what these schemas are. And each one of these is a class, a feature class. I've got points, alignments, structures. There's my ponds. So you see in my ponds, I've got my geometry and I've got my auto-generated identifier. That's kind of boring. How about the depth of the pond? I want to add that in. So it's real easy to add that in. I'm going to right-click and I'm going to say I want a new property. The name of the property is depth. Now, while I'm editing the schema, for those of you who've never played with this before, here's a huge, everybody paying attention, word of warning. Don't hit enter or touch these buttons until you're done. Okay? Do not do this until you're done. So if I type depth and hit enter, I'm going to hose myself. Don't touch anything until you're done, because as soon as I hit apply, I can't edit it. You cannot edit it. Oh, what if I made a mistake and I wanted to remove it? Can't remove it. Okay, so it's depth. It's going to be a data field. What type of data field? I'm going to say 32 character long integer. That's enough. Is it nullable? Yes. Does it have constraints? No, and I'll talk about constraints here in a moment. So now I'm done. It looks good. I double check it. I asked Matisse to double check it for me. Oh, forgot the description. Depth of pond. See, got to make sure. Now I'm done. I'm going to hit apply. It says, are you sure? Yes, I am. Now you'll notice in there that if I right click, I can delete property as long as nobody's using that property. So I'm going to say delete property. Okay, nobody's using that property. All right, so let's get back in here real quick. Whoops, pardon my typing. Depth, it's going to be that integer 32. And I'm not even going to worry about it. And Matisse is saying description again. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to hit OK. Now let's talk about those constraints. Class object, unsupported schema. See?
And Nicholas says thanks for the heads up.
Yeah.
For about applying it and saving it correctly.
Yep, because I tell you what, that gets more people into trouble, is hitting that apply. So I think I jacked something up in my ponds. Okay, so I've got the depth. It's already in there. I think I deleted it too early. Okay, so the next thing I need, new property. Now, it's going to be a pond type or water type, or I'm making this up off the top of my head. I don't know. How about the type of fish in there? I don't know. Pick something. It's going to be a string. However, I want people to be able to pick this stuff out of a list. I don't want them to have to type it in. So here's my list. It's going to be type A, type B, C, D, E, etc., F. So there's your pond types. Hit OK. They now have a list. We'll hit OK and apply that one. So as you see here, what I just did through all these quick steps is I had objects in my drawing, and I said, look, these objects in my drawing represent something that I don't have as a layer over here. So I added them as a layer. I then went into the schema editor and I started editing the schema. In other words, adding attributes and tweaking my attributes. Now the last thing I have to do is I have to grab the objects and I have to actually modify those objects in my, Control 1, in my properties window, pan over here. Now I could do that in the table editor or I could do it in the properties window. All right, because somebody's going to call me out here on this one. They're going to say, okay, Warren, why don't you grab your ponds and why don't you click the table button? What's that? Okay, there it is. There's the table and I can edit them. I don't like the table, okay, to be quite honest, not for something like this, because I can't grab multiple objects to edit them all at once. What I can do is if I've got a lot of ponds, I can do one of these cute green windows, grab all my ponds, and I can use my properties window and change them all at once. So there's my pond. I can grab multiple ponds and change them all at once. Now, here's another heads-up warning for everybody, please. This is a big warning. I've run into this too many times. I'm editing one pond, so I grabbed it. I'm going to come over here and make a change. So you see, pick first, right? Grab the pond, make the change. If I wanted to edit all of these points all at once, this is not, I repeat, this is not how you do it. If you want to edit a whole lot of objects, now what's the cutoff? I'm going to say around 30 or more objects. If you want to edit 30 or more objects, you are going to highlight the layer that you want to edit. You're going to use this button that says check out, and you're going to grab the objects and check them out first. Then you can grab those objects and come over here and do all the editing you want to. So, rule, if there's over 30 objects, check them out first, then edit them. Otherwise, if there's only a couple, you can grab them and do all the editing. And here's why. I grab the object. I'm going to do some editing. I'm going to say the depth is 55 feet, and I'm going to hit enter. Did you see that thing that flashed by? What happened was it just checked that object out and it added it to my cache. Okay, so it just checked it out, added it to the cache. You grab a bunch of objects and you try to do that, guess what happens? Again, I don't know why they programmed this. It's going to grab each one object one at a time, check it out, add it to the cache, make the change. Go to the next object, check it out, add it to the cache, make the change, etc., etc., etc. You get past about 30 and you're going to get really bored and you're going to get to kicking your computer. So, a lot of objects, check them out first, then make the edits. What type? Now, here's the cool thing. I just added in that drop-down list. So I say type, drop-down list. I'm going to pick type C. How cool and easy was that? And you can do this to multiple objects. You can make changes to multiple objects. Okay. Last thing, of course, if you've worked with this stuff before, when you're done working with everything, or every so often, you're going to want to reach up here and hit check in. As soon as you check in, you can't undo anything that you've done, but it pushes it down to the file. Now, if you do not check in and your computer crashes, don't panic. If you open up this drawing again, more than likely, those objects will still be checked out because they're not tied to this anymore. They're actually on my computer somewhere in my C drive, and they're cached. So don't panic. So I'm building up my data store, and I'm trying to get ahead of the game, and I'm not doing too badly here talking this fast. I normally
moving pretty good.
Fast on things like this.
Got a nice pace going here.
Yeah, good pace going. All right, and no questions so far, so that's pretty good. So best way of working with your data. Now, what about those shape files? No, wait a minute. Let me back up to the schemas because I'm not done with the schemas yet. All right, let's talk about that schema editing. So I'm going to grab that guy, go to schema, edit schema. By the way, okay, so I'm editing the schema of these existing layers. As I mentioned before, if I grab one of these attributes I cannot change anything of the attribute or delete it. The only thing you can change are these options down here. Is it read-only, is it nullable, or I can add a constraint. I can't delete it, I can't rename it. So when you commit your changes, they're carved in granite. Another thing, you cannot edit the schema of a shapefile. So if I've attached 5 shapefiles over here and I want to add some cool attributes, tough, can't do it. Okay, so you get to make the decision, do I want to add the attributes or do I want to just leave it as that dynamic data? If you want to add the attributes, you've got to turn it into an SDF file and go from there. Another thing people say, okay, I've got this huge thing that I've already exported, and you know something, I want to make a whole bunch of changes to it. I want to rename these things. I don't like the names of them. I want to change them, and I want to do this later on down the line. Okay, this is something we can do that Esri can't do. All right, so here's how you do it. You're going to start with your existing schema, and you're going to export that puppy. It's going to take all of these attributes and all the information. It's going to export it into one of these neat little files, which I've already done for you. After that, you can come into a file, and you can import that same schema. And if there's a problem with the schema, it's going to let you know. Like I've already got a schema called Civil Schema, so it's going to rename it to Civil Schema 1 and yada, yada, yada. So there's my Civil Schema 1. Okay, and it's got all of that information, but there's nothing in it. So now I can go through here and start editing and doing all this cool stuff that I want to do. All right. Now, once I've edited that schema, once I've made my changes, how do I get all of this information into the new schema? Let's talk about that quickly. Got to create a new SDF file. Remember, you can't have multiple schemas in one SDF file. I couldn't have saved that a minute ago. So I'm going to go to schema. I'm going to say create an SDF file. I'm going to call this one a new civil file. Got to give it a coordinate system. 3-CF MOUSE. Okay, there's my schema. I don't like it. I'm going to delete it. I'm going to import that one that I was just talking about a moment ago that I exported. Yada, yada, yada. All right, now I'm not going to do everything. Let's just work with the points for the time being. You'll get the idea. Okay, so I had these points here a moment ago, and then there's some things I don't like. Like I don't want it to have the latitude and longitude. Don't really care. We don't use names. We don't use raw description. So I'm deleting a bunch of these things that I don't need. And then let's talk about renaming. So I haven't added anything to this, so I want to rename the description, and I want to call it field code. Whoops. Field code. And I'm not even going to put a underscore or anything in there. I just want the field code in there. And the field code is going to be a string and yada, yada. I've got all this information filled in down there, and a little description. Okay, so that's what I want to do. Okay, just applied it. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to say yes. Dun, dun, dun. Check it out. I'm connected to both of them now. I'm connected to my old file, and I'm connected to my new file. Now I want to get all of these points from the old file into the new file so I can change the names of the attributes, what types of attributes that I've used. So I know this is going quick, but hopefully everybody's following along with me. So far what I've been talking about is using a civil file or using something as the basis and then adding on to it, like my ponds, editing the ponds so that I can add attributes. And now I'm going to change my mind. I don't like the names of the attributes. I don't like the numbers of the attributes, and I want to fix it. I've built a new file. I've edited that schema, and I'm going to use this tool right here called bulk copy, which is where I'm going to migrate my old points from the SDF1 into my new points, the new civil file. Reach over here to the left, grab my points. Notice that it's going to take this and migrate it straight into the same names. Now, I don't want the latitude, the longitude, the raw description, or the name, right? And which one did I change? You remember?
Which file?
No, which name over here did I change? See, it caught him. He wasn't watching. Aha. It was this one. It was the description. And I changed it to field code. So now here's a goofy thing. And years ago, you see the little drop-downs, everybody? Years and years ago, the little drop-downs actually work. For some reason, they don't anymore. Anybody can figure that one out, let me know. But I can't come in here and rename it. So I'm going to say description. I want to change to field code. Okay, so remember I changed that name to field code. I've told the program this is what I don't want. I want to check any errors that I don't want to pay attention to. I'm going to hit copy now, continue, and bang, done. Ta-da! Now let me show you what I just did. There's my old civil file. Turn off my ponds. I'm going to come in and connect to my new civil file, and I'm going to say we want to bring in those points. Grab any one of those points, take a look at the properties for the point. There you go, folks. So we can add information to our data store from AutoCAD layers and AutoCAD drawings. We can keep adding and building, but I've had the question many, many times of what if I change my mind? What if I want to remove some things? What if I want to rename some things? And worst one I ever heard was, what if I want to reorder some things? Well, reordering is a bear, let me tell you, because you have to delete all of the attributes and retype them in the order that you want to see them. Not a great option, but I want to change which ones I see. I want to change how I see them. You can do that all day long, and just push all this information into a new schema and just keep doing this over and over and over again. I know one person that can actually edit the schema inside of an Esri database, and that's because this person is a SQL programmer. The first time she tried to do it, she wiped out her database. So not something that you want to do with Esri, but this is something that we can do very quickly and very easily here. So I've been talking a lot about these SDF files, and you all see how we've got all these data tools. So I can add in shape files. I can do a bulk copy of a shape file in here if I want to, just like you saw. You can bulk copy a shape file into an existing SDF file and add a whole new feature class. So there's a lot that you can do. Now, why on earth am I talking about an SDF file? Well, just kidding. Okay, moving on. I want that slide. If you want that slide, just email me and I'll send it to you. It's a great thing to screw with people on. Okay, so let's talk about this. Couple things you're going to hear about, and anybody who's got the Esri tools will say, well, what about a relational database? Okay, we're talking about Oracle or SQL Server, some Godzilla of a database, the relational database. You can do a lot with the relational database. There are pros and cons, so I'm talking about using the relational database versus using a file, and the file that I'm talking about is something like SQLite or an SDF file. Okay, so the pros of using these relational databases. Multi-user environments. Multiple people can get into the same file and edit it at the same time because it's got object locking and versioning. It does support multiple schemas. The SDF file, I had one schema. So if I wanted to do a city plan with utilities and roads, etc., I would need multiple files and be able to work with them separately. There's never any file management issues of somebody going into a relational database and deleting the database because they can't find it. Relational database systems hide it and lock it. How many of you, and I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands because everybody can see you, but how many of you, think about it, have accidentally grabbed a folder in Windows Explorer and moved it and wasn't paying attention to where you were moving it to? You accidentally grabbed it, you're about to hit delete, you pulled your mouse, and now it's moved into another folder. Or accidentally picked the wrong folder and hit delete because you had a 4-beer lunch. Okay, you cannot do that to a relational database. It doesn't need bulk copy for moving data. All you got to do is, as you saw a moment ago when I was saying export to FDO, you just do an export of anything and push it into the database. And you can do all kinds of other database-like things, the associated properties and attaching other databases and all those kinds of things. And you can plug in other databases like an Access database, etc. All right, but there are cons to using one of those. The big one is going to be the bottom one. They are costly. Oracle, SQL Server, some of those, even if you get the free version, you still need to get somebody who knows a DBA, who knows how to deal with them. They're not portable. You can't give them to anybody. You can't say, okay, here's my database, and just hand it off to them. You've got to unload it or something like that. Also, it does require a service, which means when you are running a service on your computer, you're opening up your computer and your server for viruses and attacks. Whereas with a file, I'm not. It's all centrally located. Okay, so pros and cons for you to look at. Now, we were talking about files. I like files. We were talking about files. That's what I was showing you as an SDF file. People are going to say, well, what about a shape file, or what about a SQLite file? Shape file, too limited. I didn't even put it in this list. SQLite is the new big thing, though. So why not SQLite? Why SDF? Cool things with SQLite is you can export a layer to either one of them. There are external SQLite managers available out there, free for download. So you can open it up like Access or something and work with it. SDF files, as opposed to SQLites, are not widely adopted. Esri 10.2 will read a SQLite file, but Esri will not still read an SDF file. However, here's the weird thing. SDF does use SQLite 3 for its storage components, so technically it's a SQLite managing tool. Okay, so cool things about the SDF file. Why do I like it? It's got a 140 terabyte functional limit. In other words, you can't break it.
A lot of storage.
That's a lot of storage. However, it does have only one schema. Cool thing is that you've got instant access to it if you've got Civil 3D. Instant access. You just, if somebody's, if you're working with other consultants using Civil 3D, you just say, hey, export it to an SDF file and email me that file, and then you get to work with it. You can do a shape straight into an SDF file. You can do a drawing straight into an SDF file. You can edit the schema. SQLite files, you can edit the schema, but there are some limitations I'm going to show you here in a moment. However, on either one of these, on any file-based, SDF or SQLite file-based data store, here's the scary thing. If two people are editing the file at the same time, the program will not stop you or will not warn you. Okay, everybody listening to that one? If you've got one SDF file and two people are doing edits to it, whoever saves last wins. So if I make an edit and save it, and Matisse is over here next to me, and he makes an edit to the same object while I'm working and saves it, his wins. And I never know it until I actually refresh my layer and go, hey, what the? That's not what I did. So you need real good file management, real good practices and workflows for that. Okay? Big warning there. Okay, here's some of the things about an SDF file that you can get this right out of the help. One schema, but it does support multiple feature classes. There's a lot of cool things in there about like what schemas, what SDF files support. Pretty much they support everything. Polygons, multi-polygons, curves. SDF files support curve where shape files don't. Some of those others don't. Okay, so it does support a lot of stuff. They're very, very lightweight, and they're very portable. Now, SQLite files, not as lightweight, but just as portable. SQLite, one downside, the name of the schema must be default, so you can't change it. It does support most feature properties. It does have 2D and 3D and measurement. One of the pros is it does take SQL commands, so if you do have a SQL programmer, you can throw SQL commands directly into it. Here is one thing is that, and I haven't played with this very much, is that it does have what's called a rollback command inside of it. So remember I said is once you check in, you can't undo that, but SQLite, you can set it up so that it will do a rollback, basically an undo, but you have to do that outside of the program. And so most of the things are pretty much the same. So most of them are going to be pretty much the same. I personally like SDF files because I find them easier to work with, less restrictive, and I've not corrupted one yet. Whew, boy, that's a lot of talking, and I got done only 5 minutes, so we only lost
a few minutes.
A few minutes. That's not too bad. So I know I went a little bit fast to catch up for everybody, but I didn't want you all running into lunch for those of you who are taking early lunches. So really, seriously, thank you all very much for sticking with us today. Please remember that CAD-1, we are on Facebook and Twitter, so you can follow us, Civil 3D or just CAD-1, Facebook. You can come up there and chat with us. If you're here taking a class, you can let everybody know where you are and do a check-in. I've done that once or twice. If you've got if you want more in-depth information into the stuff that I talked about or anything to do with MAP, remember we've got online training, implementation, in-person, classroom training. We've got all kinds of things. If you're a government agency, you're going to want to talk to Matisse. Otherwise, you could just give us a call at that main line there, or you can just send us an email at info@cad-1.com. So if you do have any more questions about what I've talked about here today. And I am rambling on just to give everybody an opportunity to type in any questions that you might have before we end this out. And I see
John has a question of how can you get a copy of the recording of this webinar.
Copy I'm not sure about, but the webinar will be posted within, I'm hoping, a week now that Denny's back. She was on vacation for 2 weeks. She's got some catching up to do, but usually she's good. Within a week, this will be up on our YouTube channel, and you can find us just by going up to YouTube, typing in CAD-1, or you could come up to our website over to the events area, the events page, and click on the link to go directly to this. As far as a copy of it, if you can hack something out of YouTube, then that's the only way I'm afraid you're going to be able to do it.
Nicholas has another question. Thanks, Warren. Are you the trainer for survey field to finish?
Yes, Nicholas, I'm normally the trainer for survey field to finish. Sometimes Brian Haley has to take over for me because I'm out of the office, but I normally teach that class mostly because when we get into field to finish, this is one of the things that I actually teach in field to finish, is conglomerating survey data into one big database. Brian Haley's not crazy about that. He's not very GIS-y. Is that a word, GIS?
I think if you want to use it in this context, it's okay.
Okay, that's cool. I'll use it. But one of the things that a lot of surveyors like to do is they don't like throwing away their points. They like reusing that data. So one of the things I teach in that class is how to build their data store out of that.
All right, Nicholas looks like he had a question. Just saying he'll see you guys in the October class. Question from Steve: best way to create a shapefile for sharing with GIS?
Best way to create a shapefile is, I'll tab. Oops, where's my AutoCAD? There it is. Okay, so I've got the connection. All right, everybody paying attention to this, because one of the things I did mention was sharing back and forth, because we do need to share. You know, same thing that I did a moment ago, only we're going to do it in reverse. I go to Schema. You can create a shapefile. Okay, that's one way of doing it. Now, the easiest way, and this is going to get a little bit weird for everybody, easiest way to create a shapefile is you come into the Data Connect. You're going to put in a shape connection into a particular folder. So I'm going to go to my, where can I put this? Computer. C drive, do I have a temp folder in here? Temp folder, okay. All right, I'm going to say connect, and I've just connected to that folder. Now, I really should have named the connection something other than shape 1, but that's all I did is I connected to the folder, right? We're ready with that one? This is going to be pretty cool. Tools, bulk copy. I'm going to bulk copy from my SDF file, and I can pick a layer if I want to, or just go straight to the SDF file. So I'm going to go from my new civil file and pick my points, and I'm going to export that to the shape. You see that? Now, I got to pay attention to, darn it, that's where the drop down is. This is supposed to be called default. I'm going to find out why that's broken, that drop down. But anyway, so I'm going to say just take the points, because remember, I can only have one feature class at a time going over here. So I'm just going to take the points. Couple things if you're going to send a shapefile that everybody's got to remember. Shapefiles can only accept 10 characters or less. So this auto-generated SDF ID, I don't want to send it, or if I do want to send it, I've got to rename it. Okay, 10 characters or less. Next thing everybody's got to remember, no spaces. So 10 characters or less, and come on, edit, edit, edit. No spaces, and I'm having a hard time digging in here to double-clicking. Come on. There it is. Double click too fast. Okay, so 10 characters, no spaces. Then you should just be able to do a continued bulk copy. Run into a problem. 9 times out of 10, the problem is going to be what I just mentioned, that 10 character limit, no spaces. This one, it did create it, and I'll show it to you here. C drive in my temp folder. There it is. There's your points file. There's the shape, there's the SHX, PRJ, etc. So that's just do a connection and do a bulk copy. Do one layer at a time. Remember, it can only be one feature class and one feature type, 10 characters less, no spaces. Last thing in there is do not send anybody or take from anybody this file right here. This is the index file. AutoCAD will build one that it uses. Esri will build one that it uses, and never the two can meet. Okay, AutoCAD can't read Esri's index, and Esri can't read Autodesk's index. So if I was going to send something to somebody, I'd send them everything. You don't need to send them the CPG file, but I'd send them everything but that index file. There's your shapefile of your points, guys. There you go.
Well,
So, all copy.
we did have Jeremy who won the door prize. So, Jeremy, if you could shoot us over your email address.
Oh, we've got it.
Oh, we got.
Yep, we got him on his. We got Jeremy on our
registry.
Registry.
Okay.
Jeremy, if actually just do email info and let us know that you are at the same company.
And John had a question. Didn't know about the IDX.
Oh, the IDX thing? Yeah. I ran into that with a big file. It's not that it'll crash or do anything for everybody about that IDX file. It's that if you take somebody else's shapefile and you try to read it, it's got an IDX file, it will take forever to read that file. Delete the IDX file, it'll come up in 2 seconds. So there you go. Okay, Jeremy's still at the same company. We'll look you up, Jeremy. We'll send you a prize, all right? And just so everybody knows, on our, or at least on my webinars, I'm going to be doing door prizes for people who answer questions. So normally I would have a survey in here, but that didn't come across with my crash of my computer. So thank you, everybody, again, for joining us. And stay tuned. Come on up to our events page and see what we've got scheduled next. Thank you all much, and join us again.